G'day guys, and welcome to this Q&A, question and answer episode of Aussie English. Now, it has been a while since I've done one of these, but I think I'm going to try and bring them back because you guys quite often send me a lot of comments, a lot of questions, a lot of emails about different issues that you're having in English. So this week I put out a request for everyone to send me questions about specific issues they were having. I did this on Facebook. You guys sent me a whole bunch of questions, and I will try and go through all of the ones that I received in this episode. All right, so the first one is from a guy called Minsuk. So he said, I am currently learning Australian English. Thanks for the videos that you share. I really enjoy watching them. I'm confused about how words that start with EX and EN are pronounced. For example, expensive, exactly, enjoy, ensure. I use an online Macquarie dictionary, and according to it, I have attached the screenshots. Those words above are pronounced either X or schwa with an X, or N or schwa with an N. All right. So you get the idea. He's asking about words that start with EN or EX, and it is confusing when you see different dictionaries give you the IPA, the International Phonetic Alphabet, and that the spellings differ. So here he's got the schwa sound at the front of some of these words, the schwa sound, and then he's also got the vowel sound like in the word head or bed, okay? So this can happen because if you're speaking incredibly quickly, like I am at the moment, you can use the schwa. When you are saying any word where the vowel is not on the syllable, not in the syllable that is stressed, you can turn it into a schwa sound in English. And I'm sure you guys know about this because it's a bit of a headache with regards to English pronunciation. However, in the case of these words, expensive, exactly, enjoy, you can also use, if you pronounce it a little more clearly, the actual vowel sound, which is the sound instead of sound, okay? So that's the basic rule there. It doesn't really matter too much which one you use. People will understand. But the reason that the very first letter, the E there, has multiple sounds, it has the correct vowel sound, expensive, exactly, enjoy. But when speaking quickly, quite often we de-emphasize that first syllable because the second syllable in these words is the one that's emphasized. So have a listen. When I say expensive, which syllable am I emphasizing? It's pen, right? Expensive. The same with exactly, right? Zach, exactly. Enjoy, it's joy, enjoy, ensure. So that's the reason that's happening with those words. Don't worry too much about it, but just be aware of the fact, I guess, that syllables in long words in English, well, anything with 2 syllables or more, the ones that aren't emphasized can often become a schwa vowel sound instead of the vowel that is written or that is pronounced if the word is said very, very well, right? If you enunciate incredibly well, expensive, exactly, enjoy. And it almost sounds weird to say it that way. Christine has a question for me here. Hi, Pete. I'm always struggling with the gerund or 2 plus infinitive verbs, and then when to use the infinitive without 2. I know that it's impossible to solve these problems in one lesson, but I've given up hope that a permanent repetition might be helpful one day. I think it is one of those things where repetition's definitely going to help. And I think the basic thing isn't obviously trying to memorize a single rule that will always help you, because the problem in any language is that rules tend to be broken. I would focus more on common collocations that you're using and get used to the fact that certain verbs will be followed either by the infinitive or by the gerund, or they'll be verbs that are followed by the word to, and then they'll be followed by a word that isn't a gerund or isn't the infinitive, right? Like, I'm looking forward to Christmas. Often people will think they need to say, I'm looking forward to do something, but we'll never use the infinitive after that phrase. I'm looking forward to something, okay? One trick that I suggest for a lot of people, and I'll try and get into some of the basic rules after this, if you can put the word something after an infinitive verb or whatever the sentence is, if the word something can go in there, like I'm doing something, I'm thinking about something, that would be an example. I'm thinking about going to the beach. I'm thinking about having a shower. If you can put the word something into a sentence, usually you can turn something into the gerund form of the verb if you want to put a verb in there, right? An action in there. So if I'm thinking about something, something there is a noun. If I want to think about a thing that is an action, I have to use the verb, but I have to turn the verb into a noun by turning it into the gerund, by putting ing on the end of it. I'm thinking about eating. I'm thinking about walking. I'm thinking about going. So you just have to kind of get used to those patterns. The rules that I've found here, though, gerunds are best for the use in sentences about actions that are real or complete or that have been completed, right? I stopped worrying about the future. In that example, worrying was real and it happened until it stopped. Another example could be, we really enjoy running in the mountains. In this example, running is real and it's something that we like to do. We really enjoy running in the mountains, okay? So you enjoy that action, right? You enjoy doing that thing. Infinitives, on the other hand, are best for uses in sentences where they're about actions that aren't real or that are abstract, right? That will occur in the future. So for example, I'd like you to talk about something. I'd like you to talk about something. In this one, I'm asking someone that I want them to talk about something, but I don't want them talking about something because it hasn't happened yet. I want you to talk about something. I'd like you to talk about something. Can we have a walk without you stopping to take photos, right? Imagine you're a photographer and you're out there with your wife or something and she says, can we just take a walk without you stopping to take photos, right? So in this example, we're going on a walk, but the taking of photos hasn't happened yet. So we use the infinitive to take photos, right? Can we just take a walk without you stopping to take photos because it hasn't happened yet? So yeah, gerunds are difficult. They're a bit of a pain in the ass. Just keep persevering. The good thing is if you use infinitives where you're trying to use gerunds or vice versa, people will generally know what you mean. And if they don't, they'll ask you to clarify. Okay? Maggie, she has asked, how versus what did you end up here? Okay, so to end up somewhere. To end up somewhere means to ultimately be in that location, right? Maybe I have a really busy day today and I end up in Geelong to have dinner with my friends. That's like at the end of the day, that's where I finished. I ended up in Geelong to have dinner with my friends. So the only thing that I was a bit confused about here was the sentences you were using were how did you end up here, which makes sense. How, in what way? Could you explain how you ended up here? Oh, I ended up here by driving in, or I ended up here because I did so-and-so. But then you use the sentence, what did you end up here? And that doesn't really make any sense in English. That doesn't, because when you use a what question, you're asking for a noun, right? And if you end up somewhere in that verb, there's no object, so there's no noun that's involved in that verb. So it sounds very strange to say, what did you end up here, right? It's kind of like where you greet someone and you say, how are you? And they'll say good or bad. They're using an adjective. So how questions, you will usually describe how you're feeling with an adjective, or how something appears with an adjective. What questions, what is a noun? It's asking for a noun. What are you doing? I am doing this thing, right? Or what is that? This thing is blah, blah, blah. Okay, so how questions, they're generally used when asking for a description, an adjective. What questions when you are asking for a noun? Lewis, my problem is being stuck every time I talk to someone, especially when it comes to deeper conversations. For instance, while I'm talking, I suddenly pause for a few seconds because the words that I want to say wouldn't come to me in my mind quickly enough. So the person who is listening to me sometimes gets frustrated or loses their attention listening to me. I ended up getting frustrated with myself too because I know tons of vocabulary, but it seems like I can't use them when I'm speaking. So the biggest issue here, and I find the same with French and Portuguese, it's you need to use it to maintain it, and you have to practice it in order to be able to use it. So even if you know a lot of vocabulary, this is that sort of difference between active and passive vocab, right? I know a lot more vocabulary in English that I'll recognize and understand than I can necessarily use when I'm speaking. And that tends to be the same for everyone in any language. You're almost certainly going to know a lot more than you ever use. So in order to use more vocab, you need to get it into your active memory by using it, right? By practicing it. So I would take note of the things that you constantly find yourself trying to say but having difficulty saying, and I would practice those things, whether it's at home, whether it's with friends. The point here is that you need to actively work on it for it to suddenly be useful when speaking off the cuff, when you're talking and you're not reciting, anything from memory or off a paper. You need to practice these things so that they become very common and easy for you to recall. Okay, so the difference here for you is I think you need to move important words or phrases from your passive vocab, from your passive English into your active vocab or English. And the way that you can do this is by paying attention when you can't think of certain things you want to say. Even if you know, bugger, normally I know what I want to say here. Pay attention to that. Try and take a note of it, even if it's a mental note. Write it down in your phone, write it down with a pen on your hand, and come back to it later. Even if you write it down in your native language and then later look it up in English, just take some note, or else these mistakes or these issues are going to repeat themselves again and again and again. And it happens to me all the time in Portuguese when I am speaking with my wife and I want to say something and I switch into English because it's the easiest thing for me to do. It doesn't help me actually use the Portuguese word, right? And it's the same thing. Even if I ask her, what's the word for this in Portuguese? If I don't say it, if I don't take note of it, if I don't try and practice what she's just told me, I forget it and we're in the same position next time. Milena, she wants to know about the, a, and an. So articles in English. So there are two articles in English. Well, two types of articles. There's the definite article, the. So this is used for specific things like names of things or people, plural things, singular things, and immeasurable nouns. And then we have the indefinite article, which is used for non-specific things, and it's singular, right? A and an. So we have the definite article, the, and we have the indefinite article, a and an. So basically, I know that a lot of Russian speakers have trouble with this. If you want to talk about a specific thing, so imagine the computer in front of me. I don't want to talk about just any computer, a computer. I want to talk about the single specific computer that is in front of me, my computer. I need to use the definite article when I'm speaking with someone. So I can't use the computer at home because it's broken at the moment. If I said I can't use a computer at home because it's broken at the moment, that would suggest that I have many of them, and the specific computer doesn't matter. It's just that one of them I can't use. I can't use a computer at home. So quite often, these are important in English because they're the way in which the listener, when speaking with you, will know whether it's a specific thing that you're talking about or a non-specific thing. Michael has the question, what's the difference between noticed and realized? Noticed and realized. Now, I looked this up, and because I was thinking, I'm like, they are different, but I'm pretty sure the definitions are going to be very similar, right? Very similar. So I looked up notice, and the definition was to become aware of something, to become aware of something, which, that's the definition of the word. It can be used in other ways as well, but for all intents and purposes, the majority of the time it's used as to become aware of something. But it's usually when you visually see it or when you physically perceive that thing, right? So if I notice light on the wall, it's because I can see the light on the wall coming through the window, right? If I notice a smell, it's because I can smell, that smell. It's in my nose. I notice it. I perceive it physically. If I hear my wife singing in the background, I notice her singing in the background. I'm becoming aware of it. However, with realize, we wouldn't use this for physical things. You don't realize that light is hitting the wall. You don't realize that there's a smell. You don't realize that your wife is singing in the background. At least not as naturally. It doesn't sound as natural to say, oh, I realized this thing was happening, if you mean you have perceived it. We would use realize, and the definition is become fully aware of something as a fact. Okay, to understand something clearly. So we use realize when it is something that is going on in your mind and you suddenly understand the thing. You suddenly become aware of it as a fact, right? So if I realize that my keys are in my car, it's not that I see them. It's not that I notice the keys are in the car. It's that maybe I'm away from the car. I'm sitting in front of the computer in front of me at home, and all of a sudden I'm thinking and I'm like, oh crap, I left my keys in the car. I realized my keys were in the car. I could use notice. I've just realized. I could use notice if I notice the keys aren't on the table here. That is where I noticed they weren't here, so I realized they were in the car, right? So again, think about notice as something physical. You see the thing, you hear the thing, you smell the thing, you taste it, you touch it. Whereas realize, it's a mental thing where you suddenly realize, or you suddenly understand that something is a fact. Okay? Hopefully that makes sense. I know it's confusing, especially in Spanish, French, and Portuguese and Italian, those Romance languages, because they often have the same verb. I think in Portuguese it would be realizar, but it means something different. It doesn't mean the same thing. I think you can use it like that to perceive something, right? But we wouldn't use it like that in English. Sarah has a question here. In Australian English, when you say yeah, nah, does that mean no? And do you use nah, yeah too? And is there any difference even slightly between using no and yes to this type of saying? So first and foremost there, no and yes are used much more formally. So you can use them anywhere, but yeah and nah will be used informally, right? So quite often if I'm speaking with friends in just an informal, casual conversation, I'm not going to say no or yes unless I'm really, really trying to emphasize something. Like if someone was annoying me and asking me the same question, you know, Pete, is it your birthday tomorrow? Pete, is it your birthday tomorrow? Pete, is it your birthday tomorrow? I might say, yes, it is, yes. Or I might say, no, it's not, no. If I really want to emphasize it, I'll say no or yes. If, on the other hand, they just ask me casually, I'll say, oh, yeah, it is. Or, no, it's next week. So use yeah and nah in relaxed, casual conversations. In Australian English, we do double these up. So you may hear yeah, nah, or you might hear nah, yeah. So this is a difficult one to explain, but basically the last word you hear is the one the person means. So if someone said to me, do you like the footy? And I don't like the footy, I might say, yeah, nah, I don't. So you'll often hear yeah first and then nah afterwards, and then quite often they'll say they don't. They'll recapitulate which answer it is. Yeah, nah, I don't. The other way around can happen too. So, Pete, do you go to the beach very often? Nah, oh, yeah, I do. Yeah, I do. So I think that one's less common. I think you'll most often hear yeah, nah instead of nah, yeah. But they do happen. The thing to remember is the last word said is usually the word the yes or no the person means. Okay, so if you hear yeah, nah, they're saying no. If you hear nah, yeah, they're saying yes. Okay, and I think the reason that we do this is to show that we're accepting the question, right? So if someone says to you, whatever question is, are you going out tomorrow? You know, yes, no questions. Are you going out tomorrow? If I accept the question first, I'll say sort of, yeah. And then as I realize that I'm actually not going out tomorrow, that's when I'll say, oh, nah. So that's I think why it's happening. I haven't looked too deeply into this, but I have a feeling that's the reason we do the yeah, nah thing. We double up on it because the first one's kind of an informal a way of accepting something, I guess, right? Or agreeing with the question kind of a thing. And then the last one is the actual response. So, are you going out tomorrow? Yeah, nah, I'm not going out. Huang has a question. Pull a sickie or take a sickie? Which sounds more natural? I think I would say pull a sickie. I think you could use both. So, like, take a sickie would be like to take a day off, to take a sick day, to take a sickie. Whereas if you pull a sickie, I guess in that sense, the use of the verb pull in that phrase makes it sound like it's more malicious, right? Like to pull a joke, I guess, or to pull a prank on someone, to pull a sickie. It's more like you're not actually sick and you are pretending to be sick to get out of work or to get out of school. So you pulled a sickie. Whereas if you take a sickie, that doesn't suggest to me that you are doing something malicious or not. It suggests that you are simply not at work because you're sick. So I'd probably use pull a sickie to emphasize you are tricking whoever it is at work, your boss, and you're taking the day off. Whereas if you say I take a sickie, that would just be that you are at home sick and you're not going to work. Maybe you are faking it, maybe you're not faking it, but we don't know from the expression itself. Angela. First, I hope your baby is growing well and her mum is recovered. Yes, he's growing well, mum's recovered, but he's crying a lot at night, and we're sort of trying to get into the rhythm of things there with that. But he's going well. Noah's going well. What kind of tense is in the sentence, we are done? So, Angela, that is where you're using the present tense, because the first verb there, are, is in the present tense. We are something, we are an adjective, we are done. And so you're simply saying we are finished. Okay, so you're using the present tense, and done in this case is an adjective instead of a verb. Okay, we're done. It'd be like saying we're green or we're tired. Okay, so present tense and the verb has become an adjective. Samira, how do we improve paraphrasing? Now, this is a detailed sort of response, I guess. I'll try and do it off the top of my head, but I was recently creating a lesson for paraphrasing for the IELTS exam. We're creating a course at the moment with two other girls, and it's going to be an IELTS course, much more in depth, where we go through systematically how you guys can approach studying for the IELTS and then how to do well on it. But I had to do the paraphrasing one recently. The main place that's going to help, at least in terms of IELTS or writing an essay, is when you're writing. Okay, usually you are responding to a question in an essay, and paraphrasing is a powerful tool that you can use in any language, let alone English, to show that you fully understand the question, but then also that you have a wide range of vocabulary that you then use to answer the question without just copying and pasting the question. Okay, so for example, if the question was, do you think the government should decide whether or not people can take drugs? If you responded to that straight away and said, I think the government should decide whether or not people can take drugs, you haven't paraphrased, really. You've just taken the question and you've put I think in front of that question. So in order to paraphrase, what you need to do is take the phrase, the paragraph, the sentence, whatever it is, and you need to say the exact same thing. So you need to keep the meaning that that sentence has, but you need to use different words. So a way of paraphrasing, do you think the government should decide whether or not people use drugs, could be, do you think the state should control whether or not the public uses illicit substances? So do you see what I've done there? I've used a whole bunch of synonyms instead of the original words that were in the question, okay? And so you can do it in terms of synonyms, where you could take the exact sentence and you just change the words in the sentence, so government to state, drugs to illicit substances. You can do that. But then on top of that, you can restructure sentences. So, for instance, instead of saying, I think that the state shouldn't control whether or not the public uses illicit substances, you could say instead, I think the public should be able to use illicit substances without any interference from the state. Okay, so basically you've kept the meaning of the original content, whatever that is, a sentence, a paragraph, and you've used your own words to describe it or to reference it, but you've used your own words, and maybe you've changed the structure as well to show that you have a much deeper understanding of English and that you have a deeper understanding of the question being asked, right? Because you're saying that question again, but with different words. So that's the answer to that one. Paraphrasing. It's very, very important when it comes to writing, when it comes to responding to essay questions on the IELTS, on anything else. So it's something you might need to practice though, okay? Get a few phrases, try and rewrite them in your own words, and just get used to doing that. I have a question here from Stan. Do you think reading is the best way to improve English, or do you think writing is? So I think they're both important, but I would say reading is much more important than writing, because ultimately I think passive vocab is really, really important. Active vocab's still really important, but I think that in order to develop your active vocab, you need to develop firstly your passive vocabulary. And a good way of doing this is through reading. And I would say it's helpful because you keep seeing so many different words and you'll see them in many, many different situations. Okay, so it's a really, really good way of knowing how English is used or how any other language is used, and being given different contexts where the words are used to describe different events, different things, different situations. And so it's a very good way of getting a better understanding of what a word means, right? Instead of, say, looking it up and then trying to write an article or write an essay yourself, where you're relying on your active understanding, your active vocab within English, passively you can absorb a whole lot more and really get a sense of how words are used. So I think do both, but I definitely think read. And I noticed that, like, growing up, my sister used to read a heap. She used to read books all the time. She was an animal. I was much more sort of into sports and skateboarding and getting outside, but my sister loved reading. And I think this kind of reflected in that when we would speak, she would quite often have a much more developed vocab than me when we were younger kids, because she spent so much time reading. She also wrote a diary, which I'm sure helped as well, but I think first and foremost, having the ability to write well, you need to have the ability to read well, or at least you need to have read a lot, if that makes sense. So good question, Stan. So I have a question here from Ardashir. Ardashir asks, can we use lounge as a verb to address people taking two seats on public transport? So can we use lounge as a verb? Lounge. That's a good question. You can use lounge as a verb. So for instance, if I'm lounging around at home, it's kind of the idea that I'm lying down on a couch, spread out, relaxing, right? I'm lounging around. Or your dog might be lounging around in the sun. He's lying down, just relaxing. You could say that with someone using two seats on public transport, although I would say lounge around, right? Oh, they're lounging around on these seats. Although I think mostly I would probably just say they're taking up two seats, or they're lying across two seats. Lounging around gives the impression that they're relaxing, whereas if you're saying that they're lying down on two seats or they're taking up two seats, it has more of a negative implication to it, which is this sort of situation you have here on public transport, right, where the person shouldn't be taking two seats, but they are. So a Tiff asks, please can you tell me the difference between 2 and 4? And this is the last question for today, so thanks for sticking with me, guys. Please tell me the difference between 2 and 4. Now, I know that this is a really difficult one for a lot of speakers, especially Portuguese speakers, because in Portuguese they'll use 4 in the same situations that in English we would use 2. So I've tried to look up a more detailed response to when and where to use each of these, and I'll give that to you guys now. So 2. We use 2 when we are talking about destination. So you're going to a destination. I'm going to Melbourne. You would never say I'm going for Melbourne. That would make it sound like you're barracking for a team that is called Melbourne. If you said, I go for Melbourne, instead of I go to Melbourne. We use to when we're talking about the time, okay? It's 3:45. It's 7:45, okay? To that time, as in there's distance being covered, that there's 15 minutes until we get to that time. We use it for distance. It's about 20 kilometers from my house to the university. So again there, it's like you're covering space or you're covering time. In order to do that, to get from one position to the other, you go to that position, okay? So time and distance. We use it when comparing things. So I prefer the color green to the color red. I prefer green to red. We use it when we're giving. So I give the pizza to my wife. She loves pizza. Cal loves pizza. I give it to her. And again, that's the idea that I have the pizza, I give the pizza, and the pizza goes to my wife. It changes from me to her. It covers distance. It covers space, so we're using to show that. And then you can also use it for motive and reason. So with a verb, I came here to see you. I came here to do something, right? That's why we use the word to in front of infinitive verbs. To do something, motive and reason. So with for is used for a bunch of different examples. Benefits, right? So running is good for you. It's good for you. It's good for you. We use it for period of time. So I was somewhere for a period of time. I was in Australia for 2 years, for that duration, for 2 years. I was there for a while. We use it for schedule. So I make an appointment for the 18th of April to go to the dentist. I made the appointment for that day. We use it when we're agreeing with people. Are you for or against something, right? Are you for or against the government allowing people to use drugs? Are you for that thing, so you're pro, or are you against it, meaning you're not, you are contra that thing, right? You're against that thing. We use it for doing something to help someone, right? So I do something for another person. I clean the house for my wife. I change the nappy for my baby, right? I do that thing for someone else. I do it to help that person. We can use it with motive and reason when we're talking about nouns. So let's go out for a drink. You could also say let's go out to drink. So that's a tricky one there. If you're using a noun, let's go out for a drink. If you're using a verb, use to. Let's go out to drink. And then the last one here is function. So with a verb ending in ing, we'll use for before that verb. Okay, so a ladle is a spoon that is used for serving soup. A ladle is used for doing something. So what's the purpose of this thing? Oh, it is for doing something. So there you go, for versus to. Side note for Brazilians, don't use for when you're talking about going a distance, right? If you are going to somewhere or you're giving something to someone, if there's a change from one position to another position or from one time to another time, don't use for, make sure that you use to. Anyway guys, it's been a long lesson. I hope it helps. I would love to know what you think. If you enjoy this episode, please let me know and I will get you guys to send in more questions and I will try and answer them next week. But yeah, let me know what you think. Send me a message on Facebook, send me an email, and I'll do it again in the future if I get a good response. So thanks for joining me and I'll see you soon. Peace out.